Chapter 9. The Alliance. It's always a strange experience walking into a lesson late. It's even stranger when you've just been to see the head teacher and he's threatened you with physical violence. Murph headed back to the room where he'd left the rest of his class and creaked open the door, which seemed like the loudest noise on earth. Every single head in the room turned towards him as he scuttled in, sideways, like an unusually shy crab. He noticed several different expressions as he went to his seat: surprise, confusion, annoyance, and really needing the toilet. This last one had nothing to do with him. Murph wasn't to know this, but Sophie Clark's parents insisted she drank 2 liters of water every day. "Welcome, welcome," said the teacher at the front of the class, who was sitting at a large grand piano. As she said each word, she played a chord, which gave Murph the impression he had walked into weirdo school, the musical. The tinkling teacher was the school's head of music, Mrs. Baum. "Today I'm going to be playing you one of my favorite pieces of music," continued Mrs. Baum. "As I was just saying, Elgar's Nimrod is all about friendship and how your friends can inspire you." This was literally music to Murph's ears. It almost sounded like a normal lesson, and after being allowed to stay at the school by the skin of his teeth, any class where he might be able to make head or tail of what was going on was a bonus. He sank gratefully behind an empty desk. "Now, have a listen as I play the piece for you," said Mrs. Baum in soothing tones. She cracked her knuckles and lifted her hands above the keys. Nearby, Murph noticed Mary wince. Mrs. Baum froze for a moment as if gathering her thoughts, then began to play. And immediately, Murph realized that, of course, this was nothing like a normal lesson. Here at the school, the teachers had capes, just like their students. Mrs. Baum's was the ability to move her hands with lightning speed. She finished Elgar's lovely, inspiring piece of music in just under 2 seconds. It sounded like... well, it's difficult to describe what it sounded like. It sounded like someone was pressing 5,000 notes at once. It sounded like a musical nosebleed. It sounded like a really fat otter had scurried across the piano keys on its way to an otter party. Mrs. Baum opened her eyes and looked expectantly at her class. "What did you think?" she asked them innocently. Murph looked around blankly, then bowed his head until it touched the desk in front of him. He sighed a sigh that actually lasted longer than Mrs. Baum's Elgar concert. The lesson ended 20 minutes later, after Mrs. Baum had played them the complete high-speed works of Mozart, Beethoven, Strauss, and, oddly, several TV theme tunes from the 1980s. Everyone spilled out into the corridor, wondering how they were ever going to learn anything about music, and what on earth was the Krypton factor? Murph heard several mutterings. "What are you still doing here, Kid Normal?" asked Timothy, as he and his friends jostled past him. The rest of the class seemed to have decided to ignore him, and the corridor quickly emptied. Only Mary stayed behind, along with Hilda, the tiny horse girl, though she didn't seem keen to hang around either. "Hang on," he heard Mary hiss to her as they approached him. "Right, what on earth is going on?" Mary asked Murph, giving him the full raised eyebrow treatment. "Why did you tell me you could fly?" "Actually, I didn't ever tell anyone I can fly," replied Murph matter-of-factly. "I think you asked me if I was a skimmer, and I had no idea what you were talking about." Mary pursed her lips and looked at him with her head on one side. "You're a puzzle, aren't you? So what happened with Mr. Superman? We thought when Deborah Lamington came and dragged you into his office, you were going to be kicked out." "Deborah Wattington?" Hilda piped up. "Deborah Lamington? She's like the coolest girl in the school. Her and Dirk, that's the boy who was with her, are actually operational. Someone was telling me about it in the toilets the other day. They're like so awesome." "All right, Hilda, calm down," said Mary. "They're not that cool." "Hilda wants to be a hero, you see," she continued to Murph. "She's desperate to get noticed by the Alliance." "What are you talking about?" blurted Murph, cutting into the stream of gibberish. "Okay, can we start from the beginning? Please. I have quite literally no idea what's going on. I have ended up at this school by accident, so humour me, okay? Start with the basics, and every time you say something I don't understand, I'm going to hoot like a confused owl." Mary looked at him with exasperation, then seemed to relent and smiled.
Fine. We'll start from the beginning. I told you about capes, right?
Right, confirmed Murph.
Short for capabilities,
Hilda added excitedly.
Woot,
said Owl Murph.
If you find out you have a capability, you're invited to come to a school like this one, where they train you to use it, and, more importantly, to hide it,
Mary said.
Woot,
asked the owl.
How does the school know if you have a superpower? Cape,
Hilda corrected him.
Well, it's secret, of course,
said Mary.
But I think they have contacts in the police and hospitals and stuff. They always seem to find out when someone's cape starts appearing. The doctor must have told them about mine,
Hilda said.
because my parents sent me to talk to her when I told them that I could make tiny horses appear. It wasn't a normal kind of doctor's office, though. There was carpet on the wall and very few windows. Anyway, I think she must have passed it on somehow. Mr. Superman came to see my parents the next day. Yeah, I think the fire brigade said something about me. My parents had to call them to get me down off the roof,
said Mary.
That was 2 years ago. Mr. Superman said it was very early for a cape to start working. It's normally when you're about 10. So,
continued Hilda,
you come to the school to learn to control your cape and practice it, develop it, so you can work out if it's good enough for you to become fully operational one day. Ooh.
Mary rolled her eyes. Hilda, who still had some patience remaining and actually seemed to be rather enjoying Murph's turn as a confused owl, carried on.
Operational, you know, as in actually using your cape to fight crime, catch the baddies. They don't tell us much about it, but I bet you get a costume, a cool car, catchphrases, and everything. Look in here,
said Mary, leading Murph into the main hall, which they were just passing. Murph had been in there for lunch yesterday, but now it was deserted.
This is what it's all about.
Mary was pointing upwards to a stone plaque he hadn't noticed before, set into the wall above the stage. The hero's vow. I promise to save without glory, to help without thanks, and to fight without fear. I promise to keep our secrets, uphold our vow, and learn what it means to be a true hero.
That's the promise you make if you get to join the Heroes Alliance,
said Hilda reverently.
I knew it off by heart by the end of the first day. But hardly any of us get to join the real heroes,
Mary interrupted, bursting Hilda's bubble.
Mostly, the school just teaches you how to control your cape so you can hide it. Only a few capes are any good for real crime fighting, you know?
She glanced uneasily at Hilda as she said this.
Only the real great ones. The rest of us will have to try and keep them under wraps so we can have a normal life after school. Some people's capes are really random, actually. There's a kid in the final year called Barry Talbot who can make his teeth scream. What use is that? It frightens the dentist, I suppose. Still, there's nothing wrong with dreaming, is there?
Said Hilda determinedly.
Whether you make it or not, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a hero, or designing your costume, or working out what your hero name would be. Not that I've done any of that,
she added quickly, blushing.
Okay, so most of you are here to learn how to hide your superpowers,
asked Murph, dropping his owl act for a moment.
Sorry, capes. You're supposed to pretend you don't have a power. Well, for the first time in 48 hours, that sounds like something I can actually do.
Murph felt a little more buoyed up after his chat with Mary and Hilda. His mind was still humming with questions, but at least he felt like he knew the basics, even if the basics could be summarized with the following words. Secret bonkers school, no cape, trapped, can't tell anyone about it. The next day, on the other side of town, Nicholas Knox was striding through the reception area of Ribbon Robotics like he owned the place. His hair was swept back into a greased wave, and at the end of his long legs, his shiny shoes stole everyone else's light and flicked it back at them contemptuously. He had a black leather briefcase tucked under one arm that looked very much as if it might be full of evil plans. Since Nectar had taken over, security had become much tighter. At the back of the reception area was a row of new revolving glass doors. To enter, you had to swipe your pass on a pad beside the doors, which made a slightly annoying bleep. Then you stepped inside, and the doors revolved so slowly that you were forced to inch forward on tiptoe, squeezed tight into a glass triangle. The security systems had been personally designed by Nectar himself, whose wasp-infused brain liked nothing more than causing people a bit of needless irritation at the start of their working day. Behind the revolving doors were 3 lifts. The one with a bright yellow door could only be accessed by staff with top-level security clearance. It took you up to the area prowled by Nectar, the glass-walled 4th floor of the factory. Beyond that was the tall tower at the far end of the building, but only Nectar himself had access to that. Knox swiped his security pass beside the yellow lift and stepped inside.
Ah, Knox!
Buzzed Nectar as he watched his henchperson enter the boardroom.
I like your briefcase.
Then, worrying that this wasn't a particularly evil thing to say, he followed it up with a dastardly chuckle. But all this did was make him sound like he found briefcases mildly amusing. "Good morning, Lord Nectar," said Knox smoothly as he sat down and made himself comfortable. Although this was only his first day as Nectar's second-in-command, it didn't appear that way. Knox gave off an air of confidence and a smell of aftershave that made Nectar's antennae twitch. "I thought we might discuss our plans," Knox began.
Ah, yes, number 2. The plans,
said Nectar, greedily rubbing his hands together.
I have an incredibly evil idea.
Go on, Knox coaxed him.
What is the thing we hate most in the world more than anything?
Asked Nectar. Anyone that stands in our way? Replied Knox.
Yes, I suppose we hate them quite a lot,
Nectar conceded.
But what do we really hate?
There was an awkwardly long pause, as if they were in a video that kept buffering.
Well?
Snapped Nectar. I'm sorry, Your Waspishness. I assumed you were about to answer your own question, said Knox.
I was about to answer my own question,
said Nectar. Nobody said anything for another 10 seconds. We can't wait 10 seconds, Chris. Okay, get on with it then.
Picnics!
Said Nectar finally, at the top of his voice. I'm so sorry, said Knox hesitantly. It sounded like you said picnics.
Yes, I did. Picnics! Picnics! Picnics, 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 picnics! I just love ruining them. So my evil plan is this. Spoil as many picnics as possible.
As you might have realized, the wasp DNA that had become fused with Nectar's brain had begun interfering more and more with his thoughts as the months since his accident had gone by. It had started off with the need to sting people and a great love for fizzy drinks. Then, later, he'd found it more and more difficult to get out of an open doorway without banging into the frame. More recently, as the wasp part of his mind had grown yet more powerful, he had started developing an all-consuming obsession with picnics, barbecues, and indeed outdoor dining of any kind. The thought of other people enjoying sweet treats in the sunshine filled his whole body with rage. Picnics? Inquired Knox gently.
Yes, picnics. That's my first plan. Ruin all picnics. But that, Mr. Knox, is just the beginning.
Thank goodness, thought Knox to himself. That was starting to sound a bit stupid for a moment there. Out loud, he asked, so what is the next phase of the plan?
I want to.
Nectar gestured with a long, spindly finger to make Knox come closer to him.
I want to get into somebody's ice cream, so when they lick, I'll be there!
Knox tried to respond by raising a hand, but the loony wasp was clearly on a roll.
Not only that, I want to crawl around someone's glass when they're having a drink and creep about under a bin lid and then pop out when they lift it. Hello! I'd say.
Sir, piped up Knox, but again, to no avail.
I want to make a papery house in someone's attic and live there all summer and just buzz around a bit when someone pops up to get the suitcases.
Knox hoped Nectar was done.
Right, he said. Of course, my lord, all these things are achievable. I am with you 100%. However, may I make a small suggestion? Has it got anything to do with picnics, ice creams, bins, drinks, or attics?
Replied Nectar.
Indirectly, yes. Yes, it does. It involves all of those things, said Knox. Tell me more, you smart briefcase devil!
So, said Knox, ignoring Nectar's second odd briefcase-based compliment in as many minutes,
we have mind control helmets. We have an entire robotics factory at our disposal. We could attempt to take over the country. Oh, well, why on earth would we want to do that?
whined Nectar.
Don't you see, sir? If we take over the country, I mean us, we then have control of everything.
Nectar looked up slowly, his crispy neck clicking as he did so.
Everything?
He asked hungrily.
Everything, sir,
Knox confirmed.
Even picnics? Oh, yes, sir. Especially picnics. Help me take over the country, and you can ruin all picnics forever. And I can get in ice creams? Yes. Bins? Yes. Attics? Oh, flipping yes! I mean, yes, sir. Of course, sir,
said Knox, almost losing his composure. But luckily, Nectar was too excited to notice.
I will retask the robotics unit to begin construction of more mind control helmets straight away. We have Penny Percival's spy drones all ready to deploy. I can send them out across the area, looking for people to enslave. We can pinpoint the most powerful and intelligent, and use them to begin constructing our own army. Excellent work, Knox, said Nectar. I think you're right. It's time to lure a few likely candidates into our honey trap. That's bees,
sighed Knox.
Knox, unleash the drones!
Yelled Nectar dramatically. He found that he'd really enjoyed shouting that. So much so that he said it again, even louder.
Unleash the drones!
Never one for subtlety, the giant wasp felt like it needed maybe one more.
Unleash the...
Knox disagreed.
Right away, sir,
he said, sweeping out of the room. Nectar wandered over to the window to survey the streets and houses in the distance that would soon be under his control. He nodded to himself and felt it appropriate to murmur his new catchphrase again, changing it slightly to make it seem more final.
Yes, unleash those drones.